The studio was ice cold, but Traoré could feel the heat. The World Unity Forum wasn't just another debate. It was a stage crafted for power, and tonight that power would be tested. The seats were filled with presidents, diplomats, CEOs, and journalists. Every eye was on the center stage. Cameras beamed live to the world. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat calmly, not in a suit like the others, but in his dignified uniform, decorated with quiet honor. He didn't come for drama, he came for truth. Then from the other side of the stage, a voice pierced through Donald Trump. With his usual flair, he smiled, raised his hand, said loudly, "Captain Trout, what if I told you I have a deal that could change Africa forever?" The room shifted. Murmurs, his eyebrows raised, but Traoré didn't move. His hands rested gently in front of him, his eyes focused, calm. Trump leaned forward. "I'm offering power, wealth, partnership, but on our terms." A hush fell. A camera zoomed in. Lights flared. The world held its breath. Would Traoré accept? Blinked once slowly but said nothing yet. Trump stood confidently, waving a glossy document in the air. "This agreement," he said, "will give Burkina Faso more security, more investment, and influence. All I ask is that you align with our goals militarily and economically." The audience leaned in, some whispered, some looked uncomfortable, but Traoré didn't flinch. He finally stood. The cameras adjusted. His boots echoed slightly on the stage floor. His uniform caught the light. He looked not at Trump, but at the crowd. Then the camera, as if staring into the eyes of every African mother, father, and child watching at home. "Mr. Trump," he said slowly, "we don't measure our dignity in dollars." A gasp swept the room. "Africa doesn't need saviors," he continued. "We need respect, partnership without chains, freedom without price tags." Trump's expression froze. His hand lowered. A single clap rang out from the back. Then another. Then suddenly a roar of applause, but Traoré didn't smile. His face remained heavy. He looked straight into the camera and whispered, "We've been bought before. You won't be bought again." Across Africa, screens lit up with tears and pride. In the U.S., news anchors choked on words. "Ah!" In that moment, history shifted. The applause was thunderous. But Traoré's eyes had drifted to the third row. A woman, elderly, wrapped in a deep blue scarf, had stood silently, tears running down her cheeks. Her name was Madame Zungo, a survivor of a massacre in Burkina Faso. Her village, once erased by foreign-sponsored violence, was never mentioned on TV until now. She came all the way to Geneva just to see Traoré, just to see if he would fold. Didn't. As he stepped off stage for a break, she was waiting at the edge. "Monfest," she whispered, voice trembling. "You didn't just say no, you said it for all of us." Traoré paused. Then he did something cameras almost missed. He knelt and kissed her hand. "It's your voice." "They tried to silence," he said softly. "Tonight." They heard it. Backstage, journalists scrambled. Phones rang nonstop. Meanwhile, Trump was still at the podium, red-faced, unsure what to say next. But the crowd had moved on. They weren't watching him anymore. They were watching Traoré and what he represented. It's not just Burkina Faso, but the soul of a continent that had waited far too long to say no more. While the world replayed the moment Traoré refused Trump's offer, something else was happening behind the scenes. Backstage, inside a private corridor lined with black curtains, 2 U.S. aides whispered furiously into earpieces. One of them, Agent Collins, glanced at Traoré through the narrow opening off the curtain. He wasn't supposed to say no, he hissed. "Wasn't in the plan?" the other responded coldly. "Then we changed the plan." At that exact moment, Traoré stood with a quiet young African intern named Daniel. No older than 22. The boy was nervous, holding Traoré Unc's documents. "Sir, they said if you accepted the deal, they'd invest $300 million in our hospitals." Traoré turned, knelt slightly, and looked him straight in the eye. "What good is money?" he said softly. "If it costs us our dignity." Daniel blinked. Something inside him changed. The fear, the silence. It cracked. The cameras might have left the stage, but in the hearts of millions, a seed had been planted. And far away, in a small village in northern Ghana, an old radio played that same voice. An elder wept, whispering. He finally said it for all of us. Inside his private hotel suite, Donald Trump paced furiously. His staff tried to calm him, but he waved them off. That man just humiliated me in front of the entire planet, he snapped. He grabbed his phone and called a number marked confidential. A soft foreign voice answered, calm, cold. Yes, Mr. Trump. I want leverage. I want something on him. Anything, the voice replied. We'll dig. Everyone has a price or a past. Meanwhile, Captain Traoré sat quietly in his own modest room across the city. There were no gold chandeliers or bodyguards, just a warm cup of tea and a folded photo. It was his mother, young, barefoot, holding a baby in a refugee camp years ago. She had died without seeing her country free from foreign influence. He whispered, Mama, said no for you. Suddenly his phone buzzed. A private message from the African Union. Your speech is now the most shared clip in African history. But something darker followed. A warning text from a secret contact. They're coming for you. Be careful. Traoré looked out the window. The city lights blinked like stars. This wasn't over. Back in Burkina Faso, in a dusty village with no electricity, a little girl named Awa sat on a cracked cement floor beside her grandmother. They had no TV, but a neighbor had brought a solar-powered radio. When they heard Traoré's voice, the old woman's hands began to shake. That's our son, she whispered. Awa, only 8, didn't understand much of politics. But she knew one thing. The way her grandmother looked at that radio like it was sacred. Why is he so important, Grandma? The old woman smiled, tears in her eyes. Because he said no to what? Others were too afraid to refuse, even if it means trouble, especially then, child. In the background, the broadcaster's voice crackled through. Global reactions continue to Traoré's shocking stand. Former President Trump's team has issued no response. At that moment, a group of young boys ran past barefoot, holding sticks like microphones. Ibrahim Traoré, they shouted. He's our hero. Back in Geneva, True sat alone in silence. He had no idea who Awa was, but she would never forget him. And in her tiny heart, something new had bloomed. Hope. In a poor neighborhood of Ouagadougou, 10-year-old Sadhu didn't own an ATV, but that didn't stop him. He had built a fake one from cardboard, cutting a square in the middle. He gathered his friends, placed his ear close to the neighbor's open window, and pretended to be the broadcaster. And now, President Trump speaks, he announced. But Traoré says no. The children gasped, then cheered, waving little sticks like microphones. Their world wasn't about debates or deals. It was about pride. They didn't understand the politics, but they felt something powerful in Traoré's words. Back in Geneva, Traoré sat alone for a moment in a quiet hallway. He could hear the faint roar of the audience beyond the walls. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking slightly. Did I do the right thing? He whispered. Just then, his assistant showed him a photo sent from back home, Sadhu and his cardboard TV with a handmade sign that read, Captain Traoré gave me courage. A tear slipped down Traoré's cheek. This wasn't just politics. It was becoming something bigger. Inside a sleek, secure building in Washington, D.C., powerful figures gathered. They weren't smiling. He embarrassed us. Live globally. If we don't hit back, others will follow his lead. A tall man in a dark suit placed a file on the table. Inside, old photos, partial records. Nothing criminal, but enough to twist a narrative. We leak this, he said. Make it look like Traoré took bribes during his youth. Paint him as unstable. Turn global sympathy into suspicion. The others nodded slowly. Back in Geneva, Traoré was approached by a woman journalist. Her eyes were kind. But tired, sir. There's talk online. Accusations already starting to spread. Traoré didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded note written by his late father years ago. They will try to shame you with their lies, but truth is louder than noise. He read it silently, then nodded. Let them come, he said. I will not bend. That night, he looked up at the sky from his hotel balcony, and somewhere far away, A child was praying for him. World leaders debated and analysts scrambled for explanations. An old man watched the replay on a dusty screen in Mali. He wore a faded uniform, medals rusted, face cracked with age. His name was Adama, once a soldier, once forgotten. As Traor's calm no echoed from the speaker, Adama stood up slowly. "He did it," he whispered. Earth granddaughter, 14-year-old Fatu, looked at him in surprise. "Grandpa, I was their child years ago when they first came promising roads, water, medicine, and left us with guns and graves." He hobbled toward an old chest and opened it. Inside, a faded letter unopened. "It's from my friend. He died before sending it. He feared we'd never see someone like Traoré rise." He handed it to Fatu. "Read it. The world may lie, but truth lives." In letters, in Geneva, Traoré was reading messages too. Hundreds. One stood out. A simple note from a nurse in Sierra Leone. "Sir, I lost my son to a war caused by outsiders. Tonight I finally cried because I felt hope again." He closed his eyes. Even in silence, his words were still speaking. In a small village in southern Niger, something rare happened. Everything stopped. The market sellers paused. Children froze mid-play. The radio at the tea vendor's stall crackled with static before a clear voice rose. "Captain Ibrahim Traoré has declined a global deal live on air." An old man with trembling hands turned up the volume. His wife pressed her hand over her mouth. One woman knelt to the ground and began to pray softly in a place where they had long been silenced. Someone had finally spoken. That afternoon, the village elders gathered under the old tree. No politics, just silence and reflection. Then one elder whispered, "We've been waiting since Lumumba. Maybe he's the one." Back in Geneva, Traoré received a single folded note slid under his hotel door. No name, no handwriting. It read, "They want you to fall, but the poor, we want you to stand." He held the note like it was gold. Outside, reporters shouted, cameras flashed, but Traoré didn't blink because in the stillness of a forgotten village, his voice had become thunder. Behind the shiny debate stage, a trap had been set. A senior U.S. diplomat approached Traor's aide quietly, smiling. "Tell him we're willing to double the offer." And this time, no public cameras. But Traoré already knew what was coming. He had seen it before. Promises tied with strings that choke nations. Deals dressed in gold but backed by chains. He stood up calmly, gracefully. "Tell them," he said. "I'm not for sale." His aide hesitated. "Sir, the money could build 100 schools." Traoré turned to face him. "And if we teach our children with poisoned hands, what will they grow into?" Suddenly news broke. A forged leak claimed Traoré had secretly met with Chinese officials for private arms deals. Photoshopped, faked, but spreading fast. That night, Traoré sat alone, watching the news tear him apart. He didn't sleep. Instead, he wrote a single page in his own hand. The next morning, it was published globally. "Let the world judge me by my silence in corruption and my voice in truth." And across Africa, people began tearing down posters of past leaders and pinning up his name instead. In a dim rural hospital in Liberia, a young nurse named Alina lit a candle. There was no power, no medicine, only 11 beds and 36 patients. But she played a downloaded clip on her phone again and again. Traor's voice calm, powerful, we must say. "No to anything that makes us beg on our knees while standing on gold." She whispered to her patient, a boy dying of treatable malaria. "One day leaders like him will remember children like you." The boy smiled faintly. "Captain Traoré?" She nodded. "Yes." He closed his eyes and died before morning. Alina didn't cry right away. She waited until her shift ended, then stepped outside into the rain and sobbed. The next morning, she posted the story online with the boy's photo and 5 words. "Don't let his death mean nothing." The post went viral. Back in Geneva, Traoré read the story in silence. His hands clenched, his heart broke, and then he said to his assistant, "Cancel the rest of my meetings. I'm flying home. I need to see the people, because this wasn't about a debation more. This was about life and loss." As the media frenzy exploded, Ibrahim Traoré returned home quietly, refusing interviews, declining talk shows. But his silence made the world louder. His phone rang nonstop. African presidents, UN officials, billionaires offering partnerships. Even a Hollywood director wanting to make a biopic. But the call that broke him came from a teacher. Her name was Mariam from Bamako, Mali. She taught under a leaking roof. She didn't ask for help. She just cried. Students have started writing letters to you. They think you're the only one who sees them. Traoré asked her to read one. Mariam unfolded a torn paper. A boy named Idris had written, "If I become president, I'll say no too, like you." Traoré stood there frozen for a full minute. He didn't say a word because he knew this wasn't just a political stand anymore. This was becoming something much deeper. Millions were watching. But now millions were also hoping. That night he made a decision. No more hiding. No more waiting. Tomorrow, he would go back to the debate stage. Not to answer Trump, but to face something even bigger. The debate stage was cold, metallic, intense. Just hours before, Trump had confidently tweeted, "I expect Captain Traoré will reconsider. Everyone has a price." But when Traoré walked, in the room stood still. No guards, no entourage, just him. The moderator stuttered as she introduced him again. The crowd leaned in. Camera zoomed so close you could see the sweat on Trump's forehead. And then Traoré did something no one expected. He opened a folder. Inside were letters from children across Africa, from war zones, from refugee camps, from villages with no water. Each letter was written in hope, not begging, but believing. Traoré read them out loud. "Dear Mr. Ibrahim, my name is Jacob. I live in a tent with 7 cousins. We watch you on my uncle's phone. Please don't let us down." The hall fell into dead silence. Trump's lips tightened. He tried to interrupt, but the moderator, teary-eyed, held up her hand. Let him finish. When Traoré looked up, he didn't look at Trump. He looked into the camera. To every child watching, this world was not built for you. But together, we'll build a new one. What happened next wasn't scripted. The camera feed was still live. Millions across the world were watching on TV, TikTok, and YouTube. And then an old woman stood up in the crowd. She raised her fist. "Africa is not for sale," she shouted. Someone else stood. Then another. Soon the room echoed with voices. "Africa is not for sale." The chant swept across the hall like a wave. Security tried to quiet them, but the momentum was unstoppable. In Lagos, a crowd gathered around outdoor TVs and chanted along. In Kinshasa, people stopped traffic to watch. In Ghana, students marched from their classrooms to the town square. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, every platform crashed with one name trending. Traoré. Trump looked shaken. He adjusted his tie, reached for the mic, but no one was listening anymore. The story wasn't about him now. It was about a continent, a movement, a man who didn't yell, threaten, or beg. He just said no. And for the first time in a long time, that small word sounded like a roar. As the debate neared its end, a young black journalist from Kenya named Amina was handed the final audience mic. Her hands trembled, her voice cracked. "Captain Traoré, if saying no means losing everything, would you still do it?" Everyone leaned forward. Traoré didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, a torn photo. He held it up to the camera. It was a boy smiling, maybe 6 years old. His name was Mamadou, Traoré said. He died in a village, bombed for its gold. No headlines, no justice, just silence. The room went quiet. "I say no," Traoré continued, "because the world said nothing when Mamadou died." He looked at Amina and nodded. "I'd rather lose a deal than lose my soul." Suddenly the studio lights dimmed, not planned. For a full minute, no one spoke. And in that silence, the truth hit like thunder. This wasn't just a debate. It was a funeral for silence. When the lights came back on, no one clapped right away. Then slowly, one person rose, then 2, then the entire audience. Not just standing, but sobbing. Many had tried to silence Africa with contracts, handshakes, and threats. But today, a son of Africa had spoken without raising his voice, and the world finally listened. Even Trump didn't speak. He looked down, unmoving. For once, he was not the loudest voice in the room. A broadcaster whispered into his mic, "We're witnessing history." In Ghana, a boy named watched from a barber shop, tears on his face. In Chicago, a single mother said to her daughter, "That man just gave us back our name." Woman posted, "He didn't just reject a deal, gave us dignity." By the time Trey walked off the stage, hashtags flooded every screen. Dug the power of no. Traoré speaks. Africa rises. And for the first time in years, the world was not mocking Africa. It was listening. 1 week later, Traoré stood in front of a massive crowd in Ouagadougou. Children waved flags. Mothers held signs that read, "He spoke for all of us." Tro stepped to the microphone and held up Mamadou's photo again. "He's gone, but not forgotten. Because of him, I remembered who I fight for." The crowd chanted, "For Madou, for justice, for Africa." Then Traoré made a promise. "No more stolen resources, no more fake deals. We'll build with our own hands, brick by brick." Cameras streamed the speech live. Tears ran down faces from New York to Nairobi. This wasn't politics anymore. It was personal, global, human. And as the music played and the children danced, one thing became clear. Africa didn't need to beg. It just needed to believe. If this story touched you, if your eyes watered, if your heart raced even for one moment, then don't just scroll. Like this video, comment Africa rises. If you felt it in your soul, subscribe now so we keep telling the stories they don't want us to tell. And if Mamadou's story moved you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it.